Hey guys, Bartell's Bookshelf here with yet another book haul. Not Star Trek this time, this is just a regular book haul. So this is my second time filming this. I filmed this last night and my microphone wasn't recording, so there was no sound, so I have to redo everything. But hopefully that means I'll be able to get through things a little bit quicker this time, because I've already done this once before. But on Saturday, Nakia, Laura, and I went to a library book sale at the Roseville Library, and then we went to Book Den, which is the warehouse place I've mentioned in previous videos where they sell extraneous books for really cheap. So I ended up coming away with, I think, over 40 books. I came away with, I think, about 20 romance books, because at the library sale, they were doing this deal where they were selling romance books for like, it was $1 for 20. Originally, I was going to try to look for more sci-fi and fantasy stuff, but a lot of that was difficult to find at the library sale. So I ended up going for the romance stuff, because, as I've always said, I like challenging myself as a reader. I think it's important, and going through Autumn Amour this year has really kind of helped me expand my horizons and help me kind of figure out what I like in romance, what will keep me reading, and 20 for $1. They're cheap, they're quick, they're easy to get through. Why not? Let's give it a try. So this first half of this video is just going to be all the non-romance stuff, and then I'm going to talk about the romance stuff in the second half of this video. So this might be pretty long. So pull up a chair, get a cup of tea, whatever, and yeah, let's get into this. Most of what I got at this at the Book Den and the library book sale, aside from the romance stuff, is classics, because they had a big classics section, and a lot of these were like $1 or $2. So I figured, why not? So firstly, here we have A Separate Peace by John Knowles. This is a very famous classic novel that's been studied frequently in school. I actually never read it in school, but I know a lot of people who did. All I know about it is what it says on the back here. Jean was a lonely, introverted intellectual. Phineas was a handsome, taunting, daredevil athlete. I know from speaking to various friends who read this, and just from general osmosis, that there's a lot of homoeroticism in this book. So that aspect of it should be interesting and enjoyable. And it's also very short. This is like, yeah, it doesn't even break 200 pages, so it'll be a quick read. So I'll finally be able to cross this classic off my list and say that I've finally read it. So yeah, it should be interesting. Another classic here that was reviewed recently by Ollie. This is The Oxbow Incident by Walter Van Tilburg Clark. I know Ollie read this for June on the Range and really loved it. This is from the early 40s, about mob violence. Supposed to be really powerful, really good, sort of very unusual, dramatic Western. So yeah, looking forward to that. Another sort of a post-apocalyptic classic. This is On the Beach by Neville Shute. I really like that minimalist cover there. It's really spooky. I don't know if this is the first, but it's one of the first nuclear war, like post-apocalypse novels. And from what I've heard, this is very unflinching, very dark, very sad, and I'm into that. Nuclear war stuff kind of freaks me out. It sends me spiraling into a depression when it's realistically done, not if it's just like a zombie movie or something. But so I don't know when I'll be able to get to this one. I'll have to be in the right headspace, but I am very, very interested to finally read this. Next, I have a classic work of a British comedy. This is Three Men in a Boat by Jerome K. Jerome. And really all I know about this is I've heard of it before. I've heard of the title, I've heard of the author, and I know it's about, three men in a boat and a dog, to say nothing of the, yeah. And with the cooperation of several hampers of food and an open boat, the three men, not forgetting the dog, set out on a hilarious voyage of mishaps up the Thames. So it's sort of a very light British comedy, sort of satirical of like British society at the time, from what I understand. Very influential, a classic that I've always been meaning to read, and now I can, so I'm looking forward to that. Now I have some some classic fantasy here. This is The Book of Atrix Wolf by Patricia A. McKillip. I already have a few of Patricia McKillip's books, like The Forgotten Beasts of Eld and one other one that I can't remember right now. But this one intrigued me because I saw it at the Book Den, and it deals with in wolf shape among the wolves, he had scented danger sweeping towards the mountains he loved. So begins The Book of Atrix Wolf, the story of a man who lived among wolves, hiding from the mistakes of his past, and the woman who offered him one last chance for redemption. So, a man who takes the shape of a wolf, shapeshifters. I know Patricia McKillip's writing style is very florid and very poetic and sort of fairy tale-esque, and I love that sort of stuff. And this deals with sort of a werewolf-type character, so I'm really, really hoping that's good. I have a couple books here by Connie Willis, who's a very well-respected sci-fi and fantasy author. This is a Doomsday Book, which is a time travel story about a scientist going back in time to study the effects of the Black Plague and the people in the present who are sort of keeping an eye on her progress. And it kind of just explores that whole era. Heard a lot about it. It's a big boy. I think almost 600 pages. So yeah, it should be really dense, really interesting. And it's a winner of the Hugo and Nebula Award, so it's very well respected. And Connie Willis is one of those authors I've always wanted to read and have never gotten around to. So now hopefully I can. Speaking of Three Men in a Boat, I have another Connie Willis here. This is To Say Nothing of the Dog, which is, as you sort of could tell, was a reference to the dog in Jerome K. Jerome. So this one also deals with time travel. A guy named Ned Henry, who is badly in need of a rest. He's been shuttling between the 21st century and the 1940s, searching for a Victorian atrocity called the Bishop's Bird Stump. It's part of a project to restore the famed Coventry Cathedral, destroyed in a Nazi air raid over 100 years earlier. But then Verity Kindle, a fellow time traveler, inadvertently brings back something from the past. Now Ned must jump back to the Victorian era to help Verity put things right, not only to save the project, but to prevent altering history itself. So yeah, it's sort of from what I've heard anyway, it's sort of a comedy of manners, deals with time travel, very kind of silly, but also dealing with some like heady science fiction concepts, and I love that sort of stuff, so looking forward to that. Next I have a children's fantasy novel, Dragon's Blood by Jane Yolen. This is the first in a trilogy. Nakia actually bought the other two books, but I found this copy of the first one, and I don't know, it sounded interesting. It's about a 15-year-old named Jaqen Stewart who is a bond servant in Master Sarkhan's dragon barns. Stealing a dragon to secretly train as a fighter is Jaqen's only hope to earn his freedom. But what if he is caught? Or worse, what if he does not know enough to train his dragon properly to become a true champion? So yeah, sort of sounds very similar to like How to Train Your Dragon, except this was published in 1982, so much older. And yeah, I love sort of old, sort of a vintage children's fantasy. Jane Yolen is a writer I've seen a lot around. She's frequently involved in anthologies that print stories that are sort of inspired by fairy tales and mythology. So I know she's got that kind of vibe to her. So I'm definitely hoping it'll be a good read. And yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun. So hopefully that's good. Of course, I couldn't go to a book sale without coming back with some Star Trek. Of course, I only came away with one. But this is Star Trek: The Next Generation, number 35, The Romulan Stratagem by Robert Greenberger. On a mission to an unexplored planet near the Klingon-Romulan border, the USS Enterprise travels to the planet Elo to negotiate Federation membership. But upon arrival, Captain Jean-Luc Picard and his diplomatic team find themselves face-to-face with Commander Sella, an old Romulan enemy who's there to convince the Elosians to join the Romulan Empire. When a series of fatal incidents cast suspicion on both delegations, Data must form an uneasy alliance with Sella to prove the innocence of the Starship Enterprise crew or lose a strategic stronghold to the Federation's greatest enemy. So yeah, that sounds fun, getting Sella involved there, who's the half-Romulan, half-human daughter of Tasha Yar, an alternate version of Tasha Yar. Tasha Yar, of course, died in the first season, and that was kind of their way of bringing her back into the show. She's a really interesting character, so I'll be interested to see what they do with her here. Next, I have a short story collection here. This is Unicorns, edited by Jack Dan and Gardner Dozois. This is obviously exactly what it says. 16 magical tales about the most wondrous of all creatures. When was this published? 1982. So again, fairly vintage-ish. Sci-fi and fantasy, which I always enjoy. And this has a lot of great writers in here. Stephen R. Donaldson, Harlan Ellison, Ursula K. Le Guin, Larry Niven, Theodore Sturgeon, Gene Wolfe, Roger Zelazny, people that are very well respected in the field. So I'm sure they'll have a lot of interesting things to say about this wonderful fantasy creature, and I look forward to reading that. Another more modern fantasy book here from 2007. This is The Book of Joby by Mark J. Ferrari. And this is basically, from what I understand, a sort of a fantasy retelling of the Book of Job, where Lucifer and Satan are both wagering the soul of this guy named, this 15-year-old kid named Joby Peterson, where, Satan is convinced that he can draw him to the path of darkness, and God is convinced he can draw him into the path of righteousness. It sounds very, very dense and very, very philosophical and potentially very dark and interesting. And it's a big one too. It's over 750 pages, so hopefully there'll be a lot to sink my teeth into with this dense tome. So yeah, there you go. This one I was really excited to find. I didn't expect to find this at all, but this is the first volume of Legend of the Galactic Heroes. This is Dawn by Yoshiki Tanaka. Because I've been in sort of Star Trek mode lately, I've been exploring a lot more science fiction and also science fiction anime. is something that I've been interested in exploring. And Legend of the Galactic Heroes is an anime from the 80s and 90s that a lot of people that a lot of people really love, and frequently is compared to Star Trek. The uniforms even look similar. I'll put a picture up here. Um, but that was based off of this series of books from the early 80s, I believe, by Yoshiki Tanaka, and this is the first volume of that. I knew there were translations of these out there in the wild, but I didn't expect to find one. And, since I've been in sort of space opera, sci-fi, Star Trek-y kind of mood, I figured, why not? Let's try it. It was only $1, so. Next, I have two books by Maggie Stiefvater here. I have Shiver and Linger. These form part of a trilogy, which is a YA story about a group of werewolves who transform based around like the temperature. So like the cold changes them, and it's implied that like the cold is sort of what made them into werewolves in the first place. I remember reading the first book a long time ago in like 2014 when I was first getting into YA, and I didn't really get along with it. But that was eight, almost 9 years ago now, so that really doesn't mean anything. And I'd like to give it another try. And they had the second book at the book den, so I figured, why not? Unfortunately, they didn't have the third one, but I'll at least be able to get started and see if I like them more this time around. I mean, they're about werewolves, so how could I not at least be interested? So next, I have book 3 of the Lockwood & Co. series by Jonathan Stroud. This is The Hollow Boy. I've read the first 2 volumes recently. I just read volume 2 recently, which I'll talk about in one of my October wrap-up thingies. But this is a really fun YA series set in an alternate England that's beset by the problem, which is basically, ghosts and spirits coming back to life and haunting things. And it's about this society that's built around children who are basically the only ones who have the psychic ability to sort of sense and interact with spirits, going in and decontaminating haunted houses and things like that for money. And it's a really, really interesting series, really funny, really lots of dry British humor, but it also has a lot of sort of scary moments and a lot of moments of like sadness and sort of winsome philosophy about, life and death and stuff like that. Yeah, I really love this series. Laura and Nakia recommended it to me highly, and I'm really glad I've finally gotten into it because it's a lot of fun, and I'm really excited to continue the series with this volume. So in terms of horror and sci-fi stuff at this library bookstore, I didn't have a lot, but I did find The Association by Bentley Little. Bentley Little is one of the many paperback horror authors out there that I've seen all around. Every used bookstore I've been to that has a horror section has some of his books there. Never tried him, and since the books here were so cheap, I figured, why not? The Association seems to be one of his most well-regarded books, one of his most famous anyway, which obviously deals with an evil homeowners association that's very draconian and gets into some really dark shit, and sounds very fun and very satirical. Reminds me of that X-Files episode that had a similar thing with a homeowners association where the guy running it created this like tulpa that was like this like shrub creature that was like killing people. So maybe it'll have that similar kind of vibe to it. So hoping I'll enjoy that. A couple more classics here that I found at the library sale, some Penguin classics. The first I have is Vanity Fair by William Makepeace Thackeray. This is a very famous novel that was serialized in the 1840s, one of the many classic pieces of Victorian literature that I have yet to read. I don't even really know much about it, except I know it deals with a woman named Becky Sharp, who's become sort of a social climber. And I know that this was the basis for the film Becky Sharp, which was one of the first 3-strip Technicolor film. That's really all I know about it, but it's just it's a Penguin classic. It's nice. It's nice condition, and it's one of the many classic Victorian era books that I've been meaning to read. So I grabbed it. Why not? And then the next Penguin classic I have here is Guys and Dolls and Other Writings by Damon Runyon. Damon Runyon obviously was the basis, his stories in this book were the basis for the musical Guys and Dolls, which I've seen performed on stage. I've seen the film from the 50s. I really enjoy the musical, but I'd never actually read any of Damon Runyon's writings before. He wrote a lot about New York City and kind of Broadway and sort of the daily life of the people in those cities, gamblers, gangsters, grifters, immigrants, all kinds of different people that made up the city. Very, very colorful from what I understand. And so, yeah, this was like $1, so I figured, why not? So yeah, looking forward to that. Sort of a modern classic here, at least based on what I've heard. This is a heartbreaking work of staggering genius by Dave Eggers. I really don't know a whole lot about this, other than, it was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. It's very well regarded, and I think it's somewhat autobiographical in that it deals with, I think, Dave Eggers' brother or something like that. I'd have to look more into it. It's just one of the many sort of modern literary novels that I've heard about everywhere, and I like Dave Eggers. He co-wrote the screenplay to Spike Jonze's adaptation of Where the Wild Things Are, and also wrote a novel based on that. So he seems like a really interesting writer, and I'll look forward to finally getting into his stuff. And finally, for the non-romance stuff, I have a big fantasy chunker here. This is Soul Keeper by David Dalglish. This is the first book in the Keepers trilogy, which is sort of a dark fantasy thing about this guy named Devon, who's a soul keeper, which is he's sort of like a preacher and a healer. But then there's this mysterious flood of black water that brings all these like ancient monsters and magic back to life, and he sort of has to figure out how to exist in this new world. Nakia has read, I believe, the first 2 books in this series and really, really loved them, and she's been trying to get me to read this forever. I read, I think, the first 150 pages along like last year or a year ago. Or 2 years ago, and for some reason, I just couldn't get into it at the time. But of course, I'm a huge mood reader, so that really doesn't mean anything. I've been wanting to give it another try, and they had it at this book sale, so I figured, why not? I look forward to giving this a try, even though it is quite big. It's over 600 pages, but it shouldn't be too difficult of a read based on what I've read before, so I look forward to digging more into that. And so that was all of the non-romance stuff. Now let's get into the romance stuff. All right, so now I'm back with this huge pile of romance books that I bought. And as I said, at this library sale, they were selling, it was 20 romance books for $1, so basically 5 cents a book. They're practically giving them away. So I did something I would never do, and I came away with a huge romance book haul. So hopefully you find this half of the video interesting. I got a few Harlequins here. Of course, you got to have some Harlequins, right? This is from something called Harlequin Blaze, Forbidden Fantasies. Pick Me Up by Samantha Hunter. I guess this was based around the concept of, forbidden fantasies. So this is on the back here. Forbidden Fantasy number 13, Pick Up a Sexy Cowboy. Only a very wicked woman would stop for a hitchhiking cowboy, but Lauren Baker is no good girl, not anymore. Playing it safe never got her anywhere, except alone and broke. So when sexy Brett Wallace asks for a ride to a nearby hotel, she knows it's time to get naughty. Betrayed by both his bride and best man, Brett's bad day turns much better when a gorgeous stranger offers to warm his bed for the night. The mind-blowing sex makes him forget everything but luscious Lauren's body. The morning after, instead of a "thank you, ma'am" from Brett, Lauren gets an invitation to his ranch, for as long as it's mutually satisfying, and that's a proposition no self-respecting bad girl could refuse. Ooh, bad girls, cowboys, Next, we have a much older Harlequin here. When was this published? Oh, okay. So this Harlequin edition was published in 1989, but the original hardcover edition was published in 1988 by Mills and Boon. So this is Highland Turmoil by Stephanie Howard. She'd made an enemy of the wrong man. Sarah was caught snooping on Brett McCabe's property. The powerful Canadian developer had purchased historic Strathbiggan Castle and had plans for the area that would change the face of her beloved Highland home forever. He wasn't going to let her off scot-free. He demanded that Sarah, as a reporter for the local paper, give him good press, and despite her loathing for him, she had little choice. But it wasn't long before her loathing began to turn to something quite different and easily intense. Ever since getting into Roy's videos on Roy Reads Everything, he's pointed out that a lot of the characters in these romance novels have jobs like journalists and stuff and reporting and everything. So now that he's pointed that out, I'm seeing that everywhere, including this book. So we'll see what that's like. So next we have Harlequin Presents Uncut, Miranda Lee, Love Slave to the Sheik. I mean, that really tells you everything you need to know, doesn't it? So I was curious. I looked into it. In the beginning here, it says Harlequin Uncut is more passion for your reading pleasure. You'll find the drama, the emotion, the international settings, and happy endings that you've always loved in Harlequin Presents books, but we've turned up the thermostat just a little so that the relationships really sizzle. Careful, they're almost too hot to handle. So I guess this is like typical Harlequin stuff, but much more sexually explicit, I'm assuming. Interesting. We'll see where that goes. Bandar bin Saeed Al Serkel had lived life in the fast lane, but now this oil-rich billionaire was facing a roadblock. He had a brain tumor. There was a 50-50 chance Bandar would recover. With weeks to go before starting treatment, he would distract himself with a trip to Australia, where he'd indulge in his favorite pastime. A woman in his bed and at his command, a slave to his legendary lovemaking. That was where Samantha Nelson came in. Gee, I wonder if he's going to survive his brain tumor. I don't know. It's up in the air. I've got a bunch of historical romance here. This is an old zebra romance from 1998. This is The Lady and the Falconer by Laurel O'Donnell. And look at that cover. That's just your classic romance novel cover, isn't it? And it's got this interesting like holographic heart on the front with like little hearts inside of it that says zebra. I don't know if that was like part of Zebra's thing at the time or what, but Logan Gray was just a boy when he barely escaped the massacre that left his family murdered. Now, after 13 years, he was ready to seek his vengeance on Lord Farrendale, the man responsible for ruining his life. Logan posed as a falconer to gain entrance and lay siege from within. But as Castle Fulton fell, Logan was betrayed by an ally and by his raging desire for the fiercely beautiful daughter of the enemy he had vowed to destroy. With breathtaking recklessness, Solace Farrendale declared her hatred for Logan, then smuggled a dagger to him through the dungeon's barred door. As he made his escape, she followed, running from a forced marriage. But even a passion that bordered on madness could not keep her by Logan's side. The noble woman who claimed Solace as the spoils of war is determined to have her, and Logan must risk his life for the seductive beauty who ignited a passion more perilous than war. So I remember I picked this up because it sounded interesting. I like the whole like revenge plot line, going undercover to get revenge. It's classic Count of Monte Cristo type stuff in a romance setting, so sounded fun. A falconer, kind of unusual. We'll see. Another one here, Patricia Potter, The Scotsman Wore Spurs. Andrew Cameron, Earl of Kinloch, came to America to forge a new life free of emotional ties. But when he saved a Texas rancher from an ambush, he found himself deeply entangled and suddenly employed as a cattle drover. Scrawny, scruffy young Gabe Lewis joined the drive too, sparking Drew's compassion. The boy couldn't do much right, but Drew had never met anyone with more determination. Then, under the grime and baggy clothes, Drew accidentally uncovered beautiful Gabrielle Parker, acting the role of her life, to unmask her father's killer. Now Drew and Gabrielle are locked in a passionate dance of secrets and seduction as wild as the frontier they ride. So this sounded interesting because, being that it starts out with the female character pretending to be a man, I was wondering if maybe there'd be some homoerotic vibes, maybe, shades of Mulan, some bi panic, I don't know. But that intrigued me, so we'll see how that turns out. And this one has some pretty amazing step back art, as a lot of these old romance books do, so should be interesting. Next we have The Prince by Elizabeth Minogue. He was the hero of 100 songs and stories, the sorcerer pirate whose name struck terror into every captain on the 9 seas. Bold and dashing, wily and clever, the Prince of Venya was as deadly to his foes as he was loyal to his followers. A single smile from him had the power to melt a woman's bones within her flesh, and he was her only hope. And so yeah, this intrigued me because, sorcerer prince. It talks about how, rather than a chivalric ideal, the real prince is cynical, hardened, and cool, so I don't know if there's any actual sorcerer magic stuff in it, but it sounded interesting, and the cover is pretty understated from your typical historical romance novel, so don't know, sounded intriguing. Some more historical here, gotta have some Highland stuff, some Scottish stuff, right? This is The Many Sins of Lord Cameron by Jennifer Ashley. Cameron Mackenzie is a man who loves only horses and women, in that order, or so his mistresses say. Ainsley Douglas is a woman with a strong sense of justice and the desire to help others, even if that means sneaking around a rakish man's bedchamber. Which is exactly where Cam finds her, 6 years after he caught her the first time. Only then she convinced Cam she was seeking a liaison, but couldn't go through with it because of her husband. Now a widow, she's on a mission to retrieve letters that could prove embarrassing to the Queen. Cam has no interest in Ainsley's subterfuge, but he vows to finish what they started those many years ago. One game, one kiss at a time, he plans to seduce her. And what starts out as a lusty diversion may break Cam's own rules and heal the scars of a dark and damaging past. And really, it's just men in kilts. That's really the only reason I got this. So, nothing more needs to be said, right? Got a couple paranormal romance novels here. This is The Heart of the Dragon by Gina Showalter. Searching for her missing brother, Grace Carlyle never dreamed she would discover a secret world populated by mythological monsters, or find herself facing a sword-wielding being whose looks put mortal men to shame. But there he was, Darius Uncragen, one of a race of shape-shifting warriors bound to guard the gates of Atlantis, and kill all travelers who strayed within its borders. Now Grace's life was in his hands, and Darius had to choose between his centuries-old vow and the woman who had slipped beneath his defenses and stolen the heart of Atlantis' fiercest dragon. Dragon hottie, really the only reason I got this. Heard a little bit about Gina Showalter. I've seen her around. She seems to be quite popular in the paranormal romance scene. Never read any of her stuff. Don't know if it's any good. But, there's a big buff dragon shifter, so I'm sure it can't be all bad, right? Next we have Master of Darkness by Susan Sizemore. When vampire hunter Eden Favreau mistakes Laurent, a renegade vampire of tribe Manticore, for her new partner, he's not about to correct her. He's stolen a laptop full of sensitive files from the tribe leader, Justinian, and needs help cracking the encryption. At first, he wants sexy and intelligent Eden only for her computer wizardry, but soon he wants her for much, much more. Working by night and growing closer every day, Laurent and Eden struggle with the passion that threatens to overwhelm them. But when Justinian captures Eden and Laurent proves his loyalty to his tribe in the most shocking of ways, Eden vows to kill Laurent for his deception. Can he find a way to prove his love for her before a full-on war breaks out between vampires and humans? I think he will. So, got to get some vampires in there. Love a good, sexy vampire story. We'll see what that's like. Got a few Nora Roberts and Nora Roberts adjacent ones here. I've got 3 books that are part of a series. These are the Once Upon series. I've got 3 here. This is Once Upon a Dream, Once Upon a Star, and Once Upon a Midnight. I'm not sure which one is the first book or how many there are. I think there's like 6 or 7. But these are all basically collections of novellas with Nora Roberts headlining, and then Jill Gregory, Ruth Ryan Langan, and Marianne Willman each contributing differing romance novellas that kind of deal with magic and fairy tale, fantasy type stuff. And I don't know, I enjoy that kind of stuff when it's done well, and I like Nora Roberts, what I've read of her anyway. So we'll see how these turn out. Don't know. Next, I have Born in Ice by Nora Roberts. This is the sequel to her book Born in Fire, which is part of a trilogy about the Concannon sisters. I read Born in Fire last year, and I liked it more than I thought I would, which is what compelled me to get this one. This deals with one of the sisters, Brianna, who's more sort of reserved and shy. So I don't know, that should be interesting to see kind of where that goes. Yeah, not much to say there, but I enjoyed what I read of Nora Roberts previously, so... Another Nora Roberts here. This is Angel's Fall. A lot of these big mass market paperbacks from like Danielle Steele and stuff, they don't tell you anything of the book on the back. You have to open it, which is kind of annoying. But the sole survivor of a brutal crime back east, Reese Gilmore settles in Angel's Fist, Wyoming, temporarily at least, and takes a job at a local diner. One day, while hiking in the mountains, she peers through her binoculars and sees a couple arguing on the bank of the churning Snake River. And suddenly, the man is on top of the woman, his hands around her throat. By the time Reese reaches a gruff loner named Brody, farther down the trail, the pair is gone. And when authorities comb the area where she saw the attack, they find no trace that anyone was even there. No one in Angel's Fist seems to believe Reese, except Brody, despite his seeming impatience and desire to keep her at arm's length. When a series of menacing events makes it clear that someone wants her out of the way, Reese must put her trust in Brody and herself to find out if there is a killer in Angel's Fist before it's too late. So I don't know, a bit of intrigue, a bit of action there, a bit of crime, mixed in with the typical Nora Roberts romance, I imagine. Sounds interesting. I like gruff loners, so we'll see how that goes. And next I have another big popular romance author. This is Georgette Heyer. As it says there, she was queen of the Regency romance. I believe she published most of her stuff in the mid-20th century, like 1940s, 1950s. Over 20 million Georgette Heyer novels sold worldwide. Pretty much solidified and codified the genre of Regency romance. So I figure, when I'm exploring new genres, I always think it's important to sort of look at the authors that are considered sort of important. And they had a Georgette Heyer there, so I figured why not. Haunted by a scandalous and tragic past, Eleanor Rochdale of Feldenhall knows she will never marry, until the stagecoach bound for Billingshurst mistakenly delivers the penniless governess to the country manor of the devilishly attractive Lord Edward Carlion, who promptly asks her to wed. His ne'er-do-well cousin. But when she hears the reason for the handsome lord's sudden proposal, Eleanor can hardly refuse, and so begins a dangerous charade. I forgot to say, this is called The Reluctant Widow. Didn't even tell you the title. Within hours, Eleanor's new husband dies, leaving her mistress of a grand estate, but the sudden arrival of a menacing Frenchman strikes fear in Eleanor's heart, and soon the reluctant widow finds herself swept up in a perilous world of treachery and intrigue that endangers her own life and dearest love. So, typical Regency romance type stuff, gothic manners and that kind of thing. I enjoy that kind of stuff when it's done well, so we'll see. I have 2 books here by Dara Joy, who I've seen around before, but I don't know much about her. This is High Energy by Dara Joy. Physics. Zenita Masterson knew nothing about the subject and cared little to learn until a reporting job led her to one Tiberius Augustus Evans. The rogue scientist was 6 feet of piercing blue eyes, rock-hard muscles, and maverick ideas, and the notion that he was seriously interested in her seemed insane. But a night of monster movies, cookie dough ice cream, and wild love was almost enough to convince Zenita that the passion-minded professor was determined to woo her, with his own masterful equation for sizzling ecstasy and high energy. So obviously, I'm sure you can guess what intrigued me about this one. Big, buff, muscular scientist dude. I love buff, nerdy guys, sort of that mix of brawn and brains. So I don't know. We'll see what that's like. And he's into monster movies, so he's basically the perfect man. Another Dara Joy here. This is a Ritual of Proof. Oh, this one has a step back. Nice. Pretty good step back there. In a world where women hold all the power, a titled man can do little but accept his fate, that his sole purpose is to secure a good match and hope his bed price is high enough. Jorlan Renard has every trait necessary for that price. He is staggeringly handsome, irresistible, wildly sensual, but he is also impossibly willful. The brash male refuses to be taken by just any woman merely because she can afford him. Only one, the Markel Green Tamarin, can claim him. In a bold move, the powerful aristocrat marries him, offering him the security of her name and position. But there are forces conspiring against her, and the Markel must summon all her considerable influence to fight for their survival. However, he is not only a passionate lover, but an unexpectedly powerful ally, and soon the full truth of his remarkable abilities will begin to be revealed to all in the Ritual of Proof. So obviously this sounded pretty interesting, fairly high concept for a romance novel, kind of taking the normal relationship of men and women in these kinds of things where women usually take more submissive roles and kind of turning it on its head. It's a basic kind of, flipping of the script, but it's interesting. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see what that's like. Another historical romance here. We have Hungry Tigress by Jade Lee. Joanna Crane joined China's Boxer Rebellion because of the emptiness inside her. She was tired of being her rich daddy's showpiece and had a hunger to do good. But when the rebels, anti-foreigner bandits with a taste for white flesh, turned out worse than their ruthless Shin enemies, her only hope was a Shaolin master with fists of steel and eyes like ice, a Shaolin master who was not what he seemed. He had no wish to harm the meddling American, so when she learned his secret, Joanna's captor determined to stash her at a Taoist temple. True, the sect was persecuted throughout the land, but he saw no harm in seeking divinity through love. And the cult's mistress was the great tigress, Shi Po. What he did not see was that he and Joanna were already students. Their hearts were on the path to heaven, and salvation lay in a kiss, a touch, and sating the hungry tigress. So yeah, this intrigued me because it's an unusual time period. Set in the late 1890s during China's Boxer Rebellion, with an Asian love interest, which is pretty unusual for romance novels, at least from this time period. So I don't know, that just all seemed really intriguing, and I don't know how culturally sensitive or accurate any of it is going to be, but hopefully it's at least, interesting. We'll see. Next we have this interesting one. This is Amorous Adventures by Anonymous from some publisher called Red Stripe. A young Englishman enters Venice for the first time, traveling on a train across the long bridge which spans the lagoon. On his lap sits a full-bosomed and half-naked signorina determined to ensure that the visitor's first visit to the fabled city should be celebrated by all his senses. This is Venice in the 1920s, and Adrian Thrale is on the brink of a world richer, more exciting, and more profoundly sensuous than any he has ever known. His Venetian home is to be a ramshackle palazzo on the Grand Canal, full of exotic works of art that he must evaluate for his employer in London, and full of mysterious women that he is destined to savor to the limits of his prodigious capabilities. There's his sophisticated hostess, Delphine Tandy, the earthy but irresistible chambermaid, Teresa, the tempestuous Contessa de Torrenegra, her precociously beautiful daughter, Bianca, whose reservoir of experiences exceeds her youth, and these are just the ladies of the Palazzo Malvolio itself. Outside, the women of the great city demonstrate their legendary expertise in the art of l'amour. So yeah, this intrigued me because it's an anonymous erotic novel. It sounds very similar to sort of the old 19th century ones that were written anonymously, like Sins of the Cities of the Plain and stuff like that. But from what I can gather, this was published in 1991. Oh yeah, it says the author on the inside here, Richard Arlen. So I'm curious why this was published anonymously. Maybe just to give it more mystique. I don't know. I've never heard of this publisher either, Red Stripe. So if anybody knows anything about that, let me know. It seems like an intriguing mystery. Now I've got some shifter romance here. Jennifer Ashley, Red Wolf. Red Wolf shifter Dimitri has fought his whole life for respect. It is claimed that red wolves are tainted with coyote blood and therefore not pure. He may not be skilled at verbally defending himself, but because he's a bodyguard, tracker, and champion of the fight clubs, his fists are always ready for some rough and tumble. However, he'd prefer a roll in the hay with the woman who is his oldest friend. A spirited leopard shifter and a fellow tracker, J.C. Bordeaux has no problem forging a mate bond with Dimitri, but soon the two are called to infiltrate a rogue group bent on enslaving shifters. J.C. may have defended Dimitri from taunts before, but now they face a more lethal danger, one that threatens not only the future of their people, but also their love. One guess why I was interested in this. I'll let you think about that a little bit. And finally, one last historical romance here. We have The Husband Test by Bettina Kron. Sister Eloise was perhaps the most well-intentioned novice at the convent of the Brides of Virtue, and the one always in the most trouble. Headstrong and earnest, she was determined to surprise her frustrated abbess and succeed in her latest role as the convent's new husband judge. But to do so, this modest beauty who had forsaken all carnal pleasure must judge a warrior whose mere presence exuded a dangerous, unpredictable, and totally male sensuality. Peril, Earl of Whitmore, needed a virtuous wife in the worst possible way, and he could think of no way worse than taking a stubborn, opinionated young novice back to his blighted estate and proving he was husband material. But in the days and nights to come, he finds that the one test he can't pass is resisting this maddeningly irresistible woman. And as the dark secret of the Whitmore estate is revealed and their passion ignited by a single forbidden touch, they find that the perfect match is often made in a far more sensuous place than heaven. This just sounded interesting. I like the setting of a woman. I'm assuming this is like early, like 1300s or something. I don't know if it says, but I'm assuming like 1300s, Middle Ages kind of thing, with a character who is training to be a nun in a convent. So that sounds kind of interesting, and the idea of like a husband test. I don't know. We'll see. So that's the huge haul of romance novels that I bought, along with some other non-romance stuff. Yeah, I'm just jumping headfirst into this stuff. So if any of you people who are more experienced in the romance genre have read any of these books or any of these authors, let me know what you think. What books would you recommend? What authors would you recommend? Where would you recommend I start? Like I said, I'm just diving into this stuff head first. I'm challenging myself as a reader. I'm expanding my horizons. That's what this is all about. So I look forward to you guys going on this journey with me. But until then, I will see you guys later. Bye. Hey, bitch. Do you want to fuck? Today we're doing a haul video where I show you how much cum I'm hauling in my balls. What?